Now then, welcome to another Horton scenario. Now it is worth saying that this is not going to be the 1000 sub special because I'm recording this right after I recorded the Pelagia battle that I will have uploaded previous to this one, so I don't actually know when I'm going to hit 1000, so that may very well be the video after this one, so we'll wait and see. But this is a Horton scenario, so this is going to be an enormous battle because of course there are 8 players and 5 of those are Orc armies and we are on huge unit scaling. So I will do my best to go through the army compositions in a bit of detail. Now this map is not like Osgiliath, it's one that was made from scratch and it is a little more open. It's still quite choke pointy. It's actually kind of a river crossing in many ways. There are a few choke points that we have to defend and there are also a lot of trees we can take advantage of. This is one of the most forest heavy maps I've ever played on in Medieval 2. So yeah, it should be quite an interesting one, but we'll go through the army compositions of each player and I am on the defenders this time, and the defenders have got an even harder job than those Osgiliath had because all of the attacking armies are stronger and there's no rules about when they can engage. They can all attack at once if they so choose. So I'm playing as Dale, and I believe the story behind this map is that eventually Osgiliath would fall and then the Orcs would march north, where Dale and the Elves are waiting, because Horton is actually making a whole sort of story campaign out of all of these maps. I'm just sort of playing with them as they're being tested, to be honest with you. But yes, I am playing as Dale. And I have 2 units of Lake Town Infantry, of course, sort of a very basic unit. They're not going to be getting very many kills, but they will help pad out my army, and in amongst them we can also see 2 units of Barding Herd, potentially going to be very, very useful against the Orc factions, good against armour, heavy, not easy to push through. I've also got 3 units of Dalian Spearmen. Now the Dalian Spearmen are one of the low tier spear units that are actually armour piercing. You can see their spears are barbed. And in a similar way to the Southron Warband, the Heavy Goblin Spears, I believe, that sort of unit, they're armour piercing, and the Greenway Guards. So a low tier spear unit that's armour piercing can sort of negate some of the infantry malice fighting that spears actually have. They can be very, very useful indeed, and the Dalian Spearmen are no exception to that. They fit right into Dale's defensive playstyle as well. I have 3 units of Dalian Marksmen. Now the Dalian Marksmen are pretty accurate and they've got a decently high missile damage as well. There aren't very many of them though, and they don't have the heaviest armour in the world, so you know, it's going to be kind of interesting to see how they perform overall. They're not the only arch unit I have. I also have a unit of Bardian Marksmen over here. Previously there was a really strong case in vanilla that these guys were the strongest arch unit in the game. Of course those days have long since passed. There's more Dalian Spearmen there, more there. Then back here we start getting into my elite. So I've got hidden in the forest back here, I've got 2 units of Dismounted Earls, of course. They're not armour piercing, but they are very, very tough and they will help reinforce the line when needed. I've also got a unit of Avari Elder Pikemen. Oh, and it's worth saying, ModDB link, Discord link for the Reforged channel, and the timestamp for the battle starting will be in the description below, of course. A couple of units of Dale Swordmasters as well. They're not armour piercing, despite the fact they've got giant Zweihanders. They are very good at killing low armour infantry though, so against like the Orc Horde, they should do quite well at dealing with them, at least very cost effectively. On the other hand, very much an armour piercing unit, the slow but very effective Dale Paladins, also crouching and hiding in the woods. And then back here we have both of my high tier archer units. We have the Royal Guard, and then my general's unit is of course a unit of Dale Dragon Slayers. Not a lot of ammo, they can kill basically 1 unit, but that 1 unit can be basically anything, even a very high tier unit. Now we shall move on to Horton, the maker of the scenario of course, and he is playing as the High Elves here in this central position. He's got the most important position really, because obviously he has the place where we can all fall back to on the hills. So that's going to be important to keep. We also have the Imladris Guards, the Elder Enway Spearmen, so up front they're going to be very, very difficult to break down. I mean, the Orcs are going to have to send forward some pretty serious units to get through the Imladris Guards and the Elder Enway Spearmen. And then down here we can see that there are stakes in place, and there are Noritino warriors sort of hidden all throughout the trees. Finding where a lot of my allies' armies are it's going to be tricky in the trees, and to an extent the enemy as well. So we also have some Smiths of Eregion, more Imladris Guards, and up on this hill, this is the sort of fallback position we have. We have Elder Enway Archers, a Catapult, Nolder Elders, then we have some Imladris Storm Raiders, Falas Lords and Imladris Storm Guard. You know the sort of thing we're going to be getting with the High Elves. Very, very strong units. We have some Mythalon Nobles there as well. But yes, they are going to be very, very elite, obviously. Probably the most elite of the 3 armies on the defence. And then finally we have Medj playing as Lothlorien. And again, it's going to be quite similar here. The Sindar Archers and the Galadrim Veterans, very strong archer units. He also has a Catapult. Back here we have some Sylvan Heavy Swordsmen. they've got the armour upgrade as well, so they've got the blue capes. Most of the units here are going to have the armour upgrade, so I'm actually interested to see what the... have a look at the Sylvan Axemen and the Woodland Warriors. And if we look down here, we can see that there are indeed some Sylvan Heavy Archers, some Sindar Blade Masters, more Heavy Archers. Over here we have some Sylvan Silver Spears and Woodland Warriors. They don't actually have an armour upgrade model. I know that the Sylvan Axemen do. And then there's a few more units over here, it looks like, although they're almost certainly going to be hidden. Yep. So that's going to be a bit of a problem as the battle goes onwards, at least for the start of it. No matter. Now we shall move on to the attacking armies, and to start off with we have that one guy. He's been in a few before, he's playing as the Misty Mountains of course. Heavy Goblin Crossbowmen, that's going to be a bit of an issue for me especially. We need to deal with the enemy skirmishers as best we can. We also have a lot of Heavy Goblin Halberds, Black Uruk Warband, and then quite a few Black Mountain Uruk Blades as well. So these aren't terrible units. I mean, Mountain Uruk Blades, better than the Heavy Goblin Infantry, so it's going to be challenging for us to take this on. He also has some Mountain Trolls and some Heavy Goblin Spears. He also has some Blackback Berserkers and some Orc Bodyguards. I know the Blackback Berserkers are around somewhere, they're hidden. And then moving on here, I believe this is Gundabad. Yes, it is, played by Escal Noldir. And then we have some Orc Marauders, a lot of Orc Marauders here. They're armour piercing, but again, they're not exactly the best unit in the world. Some Rudauer Axemen as well. I don't believe you can actually pick these guys, like in just sort of free play. They have to be in scenarios, although they will make a return when Rudauer becomes its own faction. Of course, they were a unit in vanilla. Very similar to the Pelagia Marines. Then we have Rudauer Savages, of course. Standard shock infantry, nothing too special. Rudauer Berserkers, strong unit, and then back here we have all of the scary stuff. We have the Witch Realm Hammers. We have some Black Uruks, we have some Guardians of Khan Doom, Gundabad Guard, Scourge Raiders, and a unit of Trolls. And I believe there are also some Blackguard. Yes, there are. Now we move on to the two very large... Well, here we have Tsunami at the back, actually, with Isengard. So we have the Trolls of the White Hand, Berserkers, Nazkai, Bodyguard, and Standard. So they've got a lot of elites. They've also got crossbows. They've also got some archers, I know. Forward there, we've got some Uruk-hai infantry, Uruk-hai pikemen, all of the standard stuff for Isengard, plus their elites. They also have the Uruk-hai archers and some raiders to help pad their army out. At the front here, we have Tundra's Fox playing as Mordor. Again, similar fare here. They've got Uruk archers, they've got a unit of Morannon bows as well. They've also got Orc raiders, so some lower tier units, but not a lot of like really terrible armies. So we've got our work cut out for us on the defense. It's going to be very tricky for us to try and turn this around. The balance of power, of course, in favour of the attackers. Uruks, they've also got a catapult, the only attacking army that has artillery. And then some heavy maulers, very good on the attack, some Olag High. And then back here we have some Uruk Bodyguard and some Uruk Halberds. And then up here we have, well, we have Brainy Smurf's army, in quotation marks, but a lot of it I believe is actually hidden from view at the moment. So we have some Morannon Halberds, we have some Morannon Halberds. He has of course got Balrogs and Temple Guard, and he's also got Temple Inquisitors as well. So, with that, I think it's a good idea if I make a little cut until the enemies advance, because they do manoeuvre a little bit at the start. And here you can see that we have a bit of a problem really, in the sense that because of the enemy's very high skirmish presence on the field, we're not able to just sort of sit back and hold, which is a little bit of a problem. I mean, it does mean that we can't really do anything about this other than sort of return fire. And that is what Horton is doing with his Norotino warriors. He's shooting across the river into these orcs, but again, Uruk archers, Morannon bows in particular, are very effective, although they have taken a lot of heavy losses from the elven archers, so it isn't going to be easy. But the problem is a unit like Imladris Guards, very susceptible to archers. In melee, of course, they're very effective, but they don't have hit points, so not going to be easy for us to sort of weather this storm in many ways. Because of course, one unit for us is worth probably about 4 or 5 for them. So it remains to be seen really how we can deal with this. Of course, a unit like Elder Enway Spearmen is perfectly placed to deal with skirmish fire. They've got hit points, they've got shields, they're in shield wall, they're facing the enemy. Not really going to take any losses to standard Uruk archers, at least not to a huge extent. They are of course being shot sort of from over the hill, as it were. There's also some Imladris Guards in the background over here. So we do have 2 units of the High Elven Pikes. Now if we look down here, we get underneath the tree line here, we can see The Medj is sending forward some of his silver spears and woodland warriors into these trees because, of course, Lothlorien can hide most of their units in trees very effectively. It's not often you see a view like this in Medieval 2, it must be said, all under the trees. And this means that he's going to be able to try and set up some sort of ambush. Unfortunately, it is kind of easy to see this ambush coming because, of course, you're up against Lothlorien. And, of course, these units are in a little bit of danger of just being completely overwhelmed, but it is a decent idea to try and ambush because we do need to do something. We can't just sit back, otherwise we will lose. And there go the units disappearing, hiding into the woods. Oh, there they go again. But yes, they will wait, and hopefully they can strike. The woodland warriors will be very good against any of the armoured targets of the Misty Mountains, and the silver spears will be good to back them up if they are discovered. Meanwhile, we go back over here. The orc raiders are starting to make their advance across the bridge. Now, of course, they're not really going to be doing anything, but they're not really going to be coming under any sort of arrow fire either, because it's not really worth going after orc raiders with archers. Then again, if they do charge in, the Elder Enway spearmen, it's more like a brick wall, so not going to really yield too much in the way of results. Indeed, and if you look down there, we can see down the river the Misty Mountains making their advance across it. Of course, this is the area of the river they can advance across relatively easily, but there is a sort of little side river there. There's also a bridge there that I think they can advance across as well, so there are several areas which Lothlorien has to cover, and he has to do it against the Misty Mountains, and Gundabad is also sending over some support, but look at this. Just a stream of orcs coming across into the forest over here. It's interesting how there's a bridge and a river crossing. River crossings traditionally are always much easier to use than the structures of the bridges. Meanwhile, let's go back up here. So the enemy have brought their catapult forward, however, that's very, very risky because... Oof, friendly fire through the orc raiders. It's risky to do this because the elves have got such a good shot on these catapults, and also they're using fire arrows. One bursts into flames. And again, they're not really landing their hits, and this does mean that the catapult is being focused down. So this is good for us. If we can destroy the enemy's only artillery piece, we can use our artillery, our catapults, hopefully to good effect to hopefully equalise the numbers a little bit. Yeah, this was kind of a reckless move for the catapult, but then they are troll catapults, so they can stand up to a bit more skirmish fire. But with these fire arrows, it's not likely they're going to last very long. Oh, did they get a hit there? No. Narrowly missing those Imladris guards. These orc raiders just sort of stood. And they won't be really too efficient in any way. That's why they're not being attacked by archers. Well, they got a couple of kills there. But yeah, the catapult is being rather recklessly used at this point. And if we go over to the northern part here, I'm not really under any sort of pressure at the moment. Brainy Smurf has decided not to advance on my front. Maybe that's understandable considering that I was able to get a pretty decent defense up here, and also my skirmish force is rather large and it's very close to the tree line here. So as soon as he starts to advance, I will be able to pour a lot of fire onto his position. So in many ways it might be a good idea if he's backed up as he advances onto my front, because over here, you know, attacking across this central area... Oh, another bit of friendly fire. Attacking across this central area to the High Elves is not too recommended because it is a very strong position, and it's a very narrow choke point as well, which suits the High Elves very much, and it really diffuses a lot of the numbers advantages that Mordor actually has. So attacking over the two flanks, I think, would be the best move. Some Noritino warriors running around there. Again, the skirmishers aren't going to be an issue for us though. You know, it's a 5v3 and we're being skirmished down a little bit. So it remains to be seen how that's going to affect us really. Meanwhile, here we are. The orc army marching through the trees. Again, these Black Uruk warband, they're not that good of a unit, to be honest with you. But I think they look kind of cool. You know, as I've said before, I kind of like the helms on some of them. I like the rather sort of makeshift look of their armour. Now, unfortunately, it does look like the sort of Lothlorien ambush is going to be discovered over here. And then it will rather quickly be overwhelmed by a mixture of Mountain Uruk blades and Mountain Orc berserkers. mixing a good amount of survivability with a decent amount of lethality. If we look over here, where are the Lothlorians? Well, they're not actually visible yet. They will be soon though. Again, expert at hiding in woods doesn't mean you're invisible in them. But it is kind of cool to see a battle under this many trees. Yeah, we have the Mountain Orc Berserkers. Again, their effectiveness against armour is going to be next to useless against Lothlorien. But I do think that at the very least, the high amount of damage does mean that they will be able to get a decent amount of kills straight off the bat, and then when they're reinforced with those Mountain Orc blades. Because again, it was fairly obvious that an ambush was going to happen over here. So the Misty Mountains knew to advance over here. And there they are, discovered, and it's Sindar Blade Masters out here. That's a unit you can't really afford to lose. Sindar Blade Masters are very fast though, so something like Mountain Orc Berserkers is not likely to be able to catch them. And again, hopefully he can pull them out of position, and then the real ambush further back into the trees can be sprung. Okay, Mountain Orc Berserkers, they don't have the most in the unit. Now, only 163 next to a lot of Orc units which have 200 plus. But he is advancing over here, and unfortunately that means he wasn't really fooled. And this does mean that the Lothlorien ambush is going to be discovered. You can see here that this is where they are. You can see their name tag, even if you can't see them. There they are. So the Silver and Silver Spears have been discovered, as have the Woodland Warriors. And the Woodland Warriors are going to countercharge into the Mountain Orc Berserkers, and here we have the start of the fight under the trees. And the Mountain Orc Berserkers are a kind of odd looking bunch with that skull on their helms. They don't even look like orcs until you get up really close and see their sort of face models. They look more like cavemen from far away. Okay, just one more screenshot, hopefully it won't crash. There we go. No more, I promise. Yeah, these Woodland Warriors, there just aren't enough of them to deal with 2 whole units of Orc Berserkers, and now with the Mountain Orc Blades coming in, there really is no chance. And he did retreat the Silver and Silver Spears, so this unit of Woodland Warriors being left as a rearguard action. But unfortunately this does mean that the ambush was a failure, really. We can't afford to lose a unit in this way. And the Woodland Warriors, provided they've got a survivable unit near them, they can be very effective. Again, I believe it was in a match I did on Toll for Lass. The Woodland Warriors did really very well against high armour, low damage infantry. Despite using axes, they are quite skilled. Unfortunately, they are going to be surrounded now by Black Uruk warbands, so this is going to be the end for them. Meanwhile, if we look over here onto the central bridge, it looks like the attack is underway. Of sorts, anyway. If we look here, the Elder Enway and the Imladris guards holding firm against these Orc Raiders. At least I think they're all Orc Raiders. Don't think there are any Maulers. Oh yeah, there are Maulers. And there are also some Rudour Axemen coming up, so there are hopefully going to be some Javelins for the attackers. But having said that, this line is going to hold. I mean, Elder Enway Spears, they're trying to force their way through, which is understandable, but if they're going to do that, they really should have just sent up another unit just to really try and make that tower, because they could actually really punish this. Oh dear. Was that friendly fire? Yeah, that was friendly fire. Not good. If the enemy are this close, I mean that was a very good shot in there, right into the middle of those Rudour Axemen, but if the enemy are this close, we can't afford friendly fire. You know, if the enemy are this close to your lines, don't try and hit it with a catapult, because it's more often than not, you might get a lot of kills, but you're going to kill your own men as well. Particularly when you're facing a numbers disadvantage as big as this. It's just not worth it at all. It's much more worth your time to try and skirmish them down with archers, and the elves have plenty of those. There's a unit of Elder Enway Spearmen here in reserve as well. We get up nice and close. You can see the men of Rudour. I do like the look of the Rudour units in a strange kind of way. I'm quite excited for them to be their own faction. I lied, another screenshot. That'll be the last one. And again, you know, this is actually what I would call disastrous at this point. The catapult for us has killed more of our own men than it has orcs. and that could very well lose us this central position if Horton doesn't stop firing the catapult. He needs to, because these units aren't even worth going after with a catapult. You know, it's only maulers, axemen, and more maulers. You know, you can kill them easily in melee. If you don't need to use your range to beat them easily, then don't use it. Let's go back down to the south, shall we? Here, next to the river. The Lothlorien archers are firing in. Here we have the last stand of a few of these woodland warriors. It's going to be the end for them. Unfortunately, they too were overwhelmed. So far, we've actually, as defenders, we've done a pretty shoddy job so far, and we can't afford to do a bad job. The orcs are victorious down here in the trees. If you look above the canopy, it's as if a battle never happened. But if we look over here, there is a bridge, and there is a crossing that Lothlorien can use as choke points. They also have this elevated ground over here, and they have some Elder Council and Galadrim veterans that they can also use. We go into the north. We can see there is a skirmish happening. However, strangely enough, I don't know whether they're actually trying to go for my Barding Herd or my Lake Town Infantry, but the only thing that seemed to be dying was my Lake Town Infantry, and that's the one thing in my army that it's not worth going after with skirmishers. They're shielded, and they're honestly not that great. Nonetheless, this is what Mordor is doing. I'm also returning fire. Well, I was returning fire with this Bardian marksman, and it did chase off one unit of archers, but no more than that. Meanwhile, let's go down over here. We can see that victory was the elves. Not too surprising, but at what cost? There's quite a few spearmen that were killed by our own catapult. But still, the first wave of this assault here in the middle has been thrown off. So small victories, but now we can see the Gundabad charged forward their trolls very quickly. Unfortunately, not really to a cost-effective point of view, because the Sindar Blade Masters and the Woodland Warriors will do very, very well against these armoured trolls. And they will be cut down pretty quickly. Now, unless the Misty Mountains can get up here and support them quickly, which it doesn't look like they're going to be able to do, it's going to be all over. Here are the Sylvan Heavy Swordsmen. I love the upgraded look of the Sylvan Heavy Swordsmen. Again, the trolls are getting kills, but the trolls could be doing so much better if implanted within a concerted push. It doesn't look like that's going to be happening. These Sindar Blade Masters in particular, very, very skillful. Not armour piercing, but they will still do the job very, very well. Is this going to be the first infantry advance here in the north? Looks like it is, so we've got some Morannon Guard coming in here. I believe that's it. Actually, no, there is one unit of Morannon Guard and one unit of Morannon Bows that was out of ammunition. I'm going to be going in there, still trying to sort of pepper down my line, and I don't really blame them for that. You can't advance through these stakes. They count as buildings, so this is the area they have to advance through here in the north, and I have got a very nice position set up. And again, they're leading the way with spears, so I'm not too concerned about the amount of damage they can potentially do. The Morannon Bows are actually not terrible in melee, but again, they're not really going to make much headway against my position here. The Barding Herd in particular, the centre of this sort of frontal defence, are going to be sufficient. And it is at this point, I think, where I sort of pull back my Lake Town infantry behind the Barding Herd and get ready to then charge them in again. Actually, I'm curious. I'm curious about this sword model. It looks like a Dark Souls swords model. The Astora sword. Interesting. I wonder if that's where they got the asset. It's possible. They used the Skyrim Orcish sword for some of the Orc units. But now, the front line is joined. The Lake Town Infantry and the Barding Herd. I'm going to move forward the Barding Herd to really get them into the face of these Morannon units, and the Barding Herd will do very, very well here. The Lake Town Infantry, of course, just to add some more numbers to the front line. And then I'm also going to... I believe I already have, actually. Yes, I have. I've sent the... If you look in here, I've also sent the Bardian marksmen that were out of ammunition into melee, just to make sure they can't push their way through the line. They're a pretty heavy unit, the Bardian marksmen with their lamellar armour. But yes, this is the first battle here. Looks like here in the south, there is a very large engagement going on. between the Black Uruk Warband and the Sylvan Heavy Swordsman. The Sylvan Heavy Swordsman 1v1 will tear their way through a unit like this. And there are also Mountain Orc Berserkers in here. They will not be sufficient to deal with the much more highly skilled elves. However, there is a lot of skirmish fire that the elves are under, and this is really the problem that we were discovering throughout the match, is that the enemy skirmish fire was making life a nightmare for us. You know, as the defenders, you don't really want to be pulled out of position in a match where you're heavily outnumbered like this. Just get my words out. There are also some Rudar Savages coming up, so Gundabad and the Misty Mountains are making a push here in the south. It remains to be seen whether or not Lothlorien can hold. They're not the most heavy-duty faction in the world, after all. But they do have a lot of skill. And they do have a higher position, of course. They have elevated ground that they can use. Look at all that. It might be best if we zoom away from that, actually, based on how many units there are. But they are pushing. And over here we can see that they are also... Again, I'm not sure I agree with this either. Like, sending forward these archers, you're just sending them forward to die. You know, you can't afford to send forward units to die when you're on the defence like this. Keep them back here. Keep them behind your spears. You know, because the Elder Enway archers, they're not bad in melee. But here you're just going to send them forward to their doom against trolls and against a legion of Uruks and what looks like Uruk halberds advancing along that bridge. Again, I'm struggling to understand the decision making of my allies here, actually. You know, again, I was focusing on my front for a lot of the battle, but again, I'm wondering why some of these choices were made. Interesting. Regardless, you can see up here in the north, Uruk-hai Raiders and Uruk-hai Archers that are out of ammunition are now being sent forward. I've also sent forward my Avari Pikemen, just to make sure the line is solid. And so far this battle is, if I just go here like this, you know, this battle is very much exactly the sort of engagement that I want. I've managed to sort of get a bit of a crescent moon off here, you can see, and the line is holding very firm. Now, of course, at the moment they've only sent forward sort of lower tier units like Uruk-hai Raiders and Moran on Guard. Not really the hardest units to kill, but there are so many enemies that we're going to need to keep this level of... We're going to need to kill them a lot more quickly than we're currently doing, because they can just keep sending forward more men. Again, look, here in the background you can see a unit of Moran on Maulers. Again, I'm trying to skirmish them down because they don't have shields and they're pretty damaging, so I want to kill them before they get into melee if possible. And then in behind them we can see that Gundabad has also sent forward reinforcements up here in the shape of his Orc Marauders. So it's going to be a large amount of trash that I'm going to have to deal with, so my line is going to need to hold very, very firm. Again, there is a few frame rate dips, but it's not quite as bad as it was on Osgiliath. Again, these archers wasted, really. They may have killed a few Uruks and a few Uruk halberds, but not what I would have done at all. There are Mithlon nobles back here, and there are, you know, I don't understand why you would send that unit forward. It's a very puzzling choice to make. Again, there's a lot of dead orcs, but there are a lot of dead elves mixed in with that as well. Very, very worrying for us as the defenders. Again, trying to hold up to this. Oh my word! Yeah, this is a blob. The blobbiest of the blobs. It's also very hard to sort of see under the trees. So again, sort of joint push from the Misty Mountains and Gundabad down here seems to be paying off for them. Although Lothlorien does have their catapult, so with this blob they will be able to get quite a lot of kills indeed. But I think we will leave that area, lest the game crash. Ugh. Horton scenarios, man. They really take it out of your machine. So if we stay back here, a little further away from the action, those archers are dying off now. And let's head to the north, where more and more men are streaming across and trying to force their way through the line. And again, don't want to get too close to that blob because of the rather crunchy frame rate. He is sort of pushing over to the side here now as well. My Dalian Spearmen will be in melee, of course. The anti-armor capabilities of my Spearmen are good, and also the Dalian Marksmen, the archers that I've got, they are armor piercing in melee as well, I believe, because of their axes. So they may not be the most durable unit in the world, but they will add a bit more bite to my front line. So I'm going to send them in, make sure that the orcs cannot force their way through, because with that amount of marauders coming across, the mass that my line is going to have to try and hold back is going to be pretty extreme. So it is going to be a case of I will hold this line with basically everything I have. with the Gundabad support, well, the Gundabad and the Isengard support, it is going to be difficult. Brainy Smurf was the army that deployed up here, and he still has Balrogs. But time will tell. And again, I do have Swordmasters. Now, Swordmasters in this sort of situation will be quite handy, because, you know, while a lot of the Orc higher tier units have good armour, against trash they can really clean them up very, very quickly. They've got hit points as well. Again, the real centre point of my defence at the moment are my pikes and my halberds. It's going to be very, very important that they stay in the fight. But look at that. I mean, they're just sending forward more and more men. More Orc Marauders. Risky screenshot. There we go. Last one, I promise. Now, we see here, oh man, dat frame rate though. But yes, we can see that Tsunami of Isengard is also sending forward some reinforcements here into the centre. The Orcs really trying to push. The Mithlon nobles are right there, ready to reinforce. They won't be able to force their way through this central area very easily at all. So the High Elves, despite being rather wasteful, again, that's a very, very risky move with the catapult. I would definitely recommend you save it for the late game. And again, it's only raiders that you're hitting, so it's not exactly a high profile target anyway. But yes, the High Elves should hold relatively easily. Now let's go back over to here. Let's see if we can get a good aerial view from the Lothlorien mound over here. Oh man. Well, this catapult is firing. And you can hear a lot of death. This is really the fight down here. You know, defeat is a distinct possibility. So again, the problem here we're going to have is numbers. Lothlorien simply don't have enough to hold down here, and so eventually we're going to have to fall back. Let's go back over here to the middle. And of course, you know, eventually we're going to have to fall back from all our fronts. You know, this central one is the one we could hold for the most amount of time, simply because it's the thinnest. But eventually we are going to have to fall back to this hill over here. And it is going to be, you know, this hill, there is only one way up onto it, but it is rather narrow, and the enemy do have the skirmishers to try and force us off there. So again, things aren't looking good for us. The overwhelming force, and again, I'm going to have to send forward my Earls, because more and more it's looking like they're trying to just force their way through. The Earls, however, very heavy hit points. They're going to make it so that they won't be able to force their way through. The fight up by me is actually going quite well at the moment. You know, I've been able to really stonewall their advance. A lot of it has been trash, but a lot of it has just fallen apart. So things have been going relatively well up on my front. And again, this is the situation that you find yourself in when there are sort of no rules to the attackers advancing in a match where it's a 3v5. I mean, they have 2 whole armies, more than we do, and they honestly have a lot of quality in their armies as well. They've got Blackbacks, they've got all of the Witch Realm units, they've got all of the best units available to them. And more it's starting to look hopeless for us, even if, you know, the percentages are even. But at this point in a defense, the defenders need to be way ahead in order to try and make it work. And again, you can see that there's only Uruk-hai Raiders here on the front line. So once again, the attack down the central lane, as it were, has been halted by the High Elves. Again, not particularly cost effective, throwing away that unit of archers, but it was ultimately successful. Right, okay, let's take our lives into our hands and try and go under the canopy and see if this thing will crash. That frame rate. Oh man, I apologise. Okay, so here we are. Right up close and personal, there are Rudal Berserkers here on the front line. Is that Orc body? No, it's Heavy Goblin Spears. The Rudal Berserkers are mostly an anti-armor unit. That's what really sets them apart. There are some Sylvan Axemen here on the front line as well. So Lothlorien will be able to hold here, but Lothlorien also has 2 ways that they have to cover, and they don't have enough to do that forever. So eventually Lothlorien are going to fall. But they have done a relatively decent job again. The ambush at the start was a bit of a waste, but other than that, I would say that Lothlorien have done all they can at this point. I mean, coming under crossbow fire and archer fire, there isn't really much you can do. Here though, the High Elves launching their artillery. Again, the more orcs that die, the more the frame rate will clear up. And already it's starting to clear up a little bit. So again, another advance coming down this middle lane, across the bridge. These Elder Enway Spearmen are in melee against the last of the raiders, but Uruks are being sent up along with Uruk-hai pikemen. 2 units of Uruks and a unit of Uruk-hai pikemen. They're going to hope that they can really start to wear down the High Elves in terms of defence, because look how many men there are still in reserve back there. And that's only one army, that's tsunamis. Again, a nice hit right there into the middle of the Uruks, but again, it's not really a high profile unit that we're going after there. Let's have a look over here. So again, this front line. You can see that it is still holding firm. There's a little bit of a dip here in the middle. These Uruk Reavers came up. And again, these Dalian marksmen. The Barding Herd and the pikemen will still hold firm. And again, if they want to push through this line, they're going to need a lot more than this. So my front line is holding relatively well at the moment. I believe at this point in the battle I still had a few Lake Town infantries left alive, which is amusing. But yeah, that, you know, the slew of marauders that they received as backup is going to make life a little bit more difficult for me, simply because there's a lot more to kill. But the line should hold. I'm not worried about my line breaking at this point until they commit some of their scarier stuff. You know, something like the Balrogs would give me cause for concern at this point. But I do still have my Paladins and I do still have my Sword Masters. So life is pretty decent up where I'm at. You know, I have managed to stonewall them pretty effectively up till this point. The High Elves, on the other hand, have had to deal with a bit more of a wave-by-wave assault, whereas at me, they've come in a big continuous stream. Now, unfortunately, with pikemen on the front line, the spearmen might struggle. You know, this might be a pretty effective assault unless they can get some archers firing in. Some Noratirna warriors there. Okay, let's go for the riskiest front on the field once again. Again, it's turned into a battle of 3 choke points at this point. Okay, here we are. We can see that there are some High Elven Noratirna warriors that were sent down here as some support. And they have actually been forced back across the river, the Misty Mountains. But again, all it takes is another wave, another big push. And there are some heavy Goblin Halberds. Again, Horton is being too aggressive and too wasteful with this unit. They're just going to die. There's no point in sending them in. And we can't afford to be wasteful.
They have lost half their men.
The art of defending is really all about making everything pay for itself and then some. Being wasteful is the way you lose. Of course, you could say that's total war in general, but definitely when you're on the defence, I've found. Again, you can't send in one unit and expect it to do well. You're sending Hordes and Ladris Guards now, but I love Horton, but in this match he's been very wasteful at this point. Uruk-hai pikemen. Very, very strong unit. Basically the focus of Isengard. When you think of Isengard, you think of their pikes and their crossbows. Meanwhile, you can see here that I'm actually starting to push them back on this front. You know, and they keep sending in more and more lower tier units, so I've got another unit of raiders coming in. And again, it might be that they smell blood on other fronts and they're just sort of sending up these units to keep my men occupied, so I can't really reinforce, and it does work to an extent. There are some Uruk-hai archers and some Uruk archers firing, but I'm not really too concerned about that. They're both very depleted units. You can see my line is really starting to force them back a little bit. Going to need to send forward my pikes and my Barding Herd with them to make sure that I make that advantage stick. But again, if you just look at the amount of red on the other side of the river that we've still got to deal with, again, the only thing that I've got in reserve at this point are my shock units. It's very windy outside today. I don't know if you can hear that through the mic. But yes, this, you know, these orcs are starting to sort of, well, they're starting to get a bit winded. Defeat is almost a certainty as well. The pikes are sort of starting to leave the front line a little bit, so the Uruks will start to struggle against the High Elves. That's good news for us. Again, the attack is going to afford to be a bit wasteful though. There goes the Lothlorien catapult firing in. Well, the frame rate's starting to get a little bit better, unlike in the Osgiliath match where it never got better. In fact, the Lothlorien player is actually trying to take the fight to the enemy, and with a lot of units like this, that is actually perhaps worth doing. Catching the Misty Mountains off guard a little bit. Sentinels of the Woodland Realms, Sylvan Heavy Spearmen. Trying to get into these crossbowmen, and the crossbowmen have really been the bane of Lothlorien's existence at this point. It has been a very brutal fight for Lothlorien. It's not been the easiest thing in the world for them to defend. And again, of all the places on the map to defend, I would say Lothlorien really drew the short straw. The High Elves only have one narrow bridge, and I only have one slightly wider river crossing, whereas Lothlorien has to cover essentially a bridge and a river crossing down here, and there is potentially another bridge they can use, although the enemy did decide not to use it at all. So even so, look at all those goblins in the background. There are also trolls. See if we can get in a little bit closer. You can see the trolls through the trees. Frame rate, no. Don't abandon me now. There go the trolls. Into the unit of archers. There is archer fire coming in. So Lothlorien, not all is lost. Although at this point I would certainly say that Lothlorien are just trying to get as many kills as they possibly can. To try and make it so that there won't be a force coming up from the south worth mentioning for the High Elves. Meanwhile, let's go back over to the bridge, shall we? I believe that the engagement that's causing this much lag actually is now the one that's in the north. You can see over here the Imladris Guards. They have managed to push off this next wave, although there is another unit ready to come in, and it is another unit of Uruks, keeping up the pressure on the central avenue of attack. Meanwhile over here, I believe at this point I had sent in my Dale Swordmasters as well. In fact, if we look down here, I had sent in my Paladins because my line was starting to get a little bit thin in places. Dalian Paladins, very, very heavy shock unit. Very, very effective against armour. Quite slow, but then in this situation, speed is not exactly of the essence. And once again, I'm starting to push them back. So the amount of kills I'm inflicting on the enemy, even though they are of lower quality, these units, still good news for us. If we look back over here, however, we can see here,
We've lost half of our men.
this is a unit of Gundabad Guard, and in the background you can see the Guardians of Kharn Doom and the Witch Realm Blackguard. So Gundabad is going to deploy their quality units up here in the north, and that might well be enough to defeat my line at this point, because I've been holding for so long against so many men that the Gundabad units of that quality may well be enough to finally finish my line off. They'll have to pay for it though, because there are still Paladins, there are still Swordmasters, there are still Earls, there are still Pikemen and Barding Herd as well. Look at that front line. I have pushed them back, so this is the sort of situation Dale does very well in. You know, they can skirmish down the enemy, and their melee units are very strong, very sturdy, very heavy. They're not particularly fast. You're not going to be like catching many people off guard with Dale, but if you like playing defensively, then you like the human factions, then Dale and Gondor are the way to go, and I think honestly I prefer Dale. Those archers. Archers are definitely a very, very important tool. Meanwhile, the High Elves are really starting to push back the Orcs. This other unit of Uruks is going to fall as well. Isengard are sending forward a unit of Uruk-hai pikemen. Again, the pikemen are going to be significant, because the pikemen should be able to turn this fight around. And then the centre is going to be under threat again, although there is another line of defence back here with these Elder Enway Spearmen and Mithlon Nobles and Noratirno Warriors. Let's go back down south again, into the trees. Again, if you look at the sort of the frames in the battle, it's not actually particularly a long one as such, although it felt quite long. Again, there was a bit of manoeuvring. Again, the Mountain Pass battle I did was almost twice as long as this, but then that was mostly people just moving around. As you can see, the Lothlorien line is starting to get quite thin under the onslaught from primarily the Misty Mountains at this point. The Gundabad force that was sent down here was largely dealt with. But the Misty Mountains, the numbers that they are bringing, looks like it's going to be too much, and now here come the Blackbacks, and the Blackbacks, an extremely damaging unit, and that will be what finally breaks the Lothlorien line, I think. Sylvan Heavy Swordsmen, Spearmen and Archers, they're all very good, but they're not going to be able to match the savagery of the Blackbacks in melee. So this looks like it's going to be the end for Lothlorien's defence down here. And their catapult is out of ammo. Catapult did a pretty good job down here though. There's going to be a lot of crispy orcs. The Galadriel veteran warriors are still running around somewhere as well, so more kills can be had, but eventually the south is going to fall. The south looks like it's going to be the first place to fall, in fact. Although, maybe not true. I mean, the middle is not going to fall. The middle's going to be the last place to fall, but at this point, my line is under an extreme amount of pressure.
For defeat seems almost certain.
You can see, now that Gundabad have committed their quality units here, both offensive and defensive, my line is starting to struggle. It's not quite as healthy as it once was. And again, I had to deal with essentially 2.5 armies bearing down on my line. And I realise at this point that it's fruitless to try and carry on fighting. So I'm going to retreat my Royal Guard. They are out of ammunition, but they are a decent melee unit. So I'm going to try and retreat them and have them for the last stand on the hill at the back. Again, it was the skirmishers really that did me in. The Uruk-hai crossbowmen that they brought up. Crossbows are pretty lethal to a high armour faction, and that is certainly what Dale are. Alas, this is the end. I'm being pushed back now. Again, Moran on halberds were also committed, and that's a very good choice. Good against armour, and will also help force me back. Let's see if we can get in a little closer. We can see that there are earls. You can see there are paladins. The barding herd, the sword masters, the marksmen, but it's not going to be enough. The orcs just using their weight. It's like the tide coming in. And I think I'll back away from that before the frame rate gets too much worse. But yeah, this is going to be the end very shortly. In the south, it looks like Lothlorien will actually probably last longer than me. If we look down here, there are Elder Council. Yeah, the Galadriel veterans are in melee against the Blackbacks as well. A clash of the Titans. Although victory, it does look like the, well, balance of forces is evenly matched. None of them are going to come out of this particular battle looking too pretty.
Our ally lies dead, slain
Well,
by
that's
the
a
enemy.
shame.
We
There
must
goes the
hasten and
Lothlorien
avenge him.
general. So Medj is going to commit all of his army down here. He's going to have just every single one. He's not going to fall back anything to the final stand. He's going to try and do as much damage to the Misty Mountains down here in the trees as he possibly can. And the frame rate down here is actually looking relatively smooth. Who would have known such a thing was possible? Heavy goblin infantry and halberds. Again, it's the crossbows and the blackbacks the Misty Mountains provide that we really don't want in the fight late on. I mean, it's starting to look like we don't stand a chance at all. Look at the balance of power. We've fallen nearly 10% behind, so it's looking like a hopeless situation. But still we fight on. The catapult is out of ammunition. Its crew just stood there, waiting for their inevitable fate. Again, it looks like they're going to defeat those Norrtuno warriors, which were sent in rather needlessly again. Bit of a waste. They should have been kept back here. When a line is lost, don't bother trying to reinforce it. You're just going to throw away more men for nothing. Especially not when you've got another good line of defence here with Elder Enway Spearmen and Mithlon Nobles. The numbers that those Norrtuno warriors could have provided could have really helped with that line there. Although not that it's going to matter too much, because my defence is almost completely gone up here in the north. Look at that. It was a really big push that they made. They made several big pushes during the battle, and I was able to throw off I think 2 of them. But the third one, with all of that quality from the Gundabad army, you know, there was no way. But still, I did make them pay for it at least. But things are starting to look quite bleak. So yes, I have fallen back. And really it's going to be a case of, as soon as the Lothlorien army falls, fall back to the mountain, and try and hold it. And the Lothlorien army is not going to last too much longer, you would have thought. The Blackbacks have been reinforced by halberdiers. Not the most effective unit to use against the Galadriel, but it doesn't really matter. The numbers are going to be too much for the elves down here to really match up to. Maybe it would have been different if we had the Woodland Realms in the south. OP. The Elder Council. Backed up by the Royal Guard. They won't be that OP for long. Pretty soon they will receive the nerf. Here we can see some Mountain Uruk archers in melee. Again, and thinking back on this scenario as it was, I don't think the attackers should have been given quite so many skirmishers. You know, when you've got 5 orc armies, the idea really should be that you sort of charge in and try and use your mass and sort of really use that horde mentality. Being skirmished down as a defender, it feels kind of lame because you know you're going to lose at that point. But even so, there's nothing wrong with playing a battle that's hopeless to try and win if it's fun, and this was very fun indeed. Lothlorien really doing their best. And these Galadriel veterans are no joke. They're really very, very strong. The skill they have in melee, the amount of damage they can do. Definitely the one unit in Lothlorien I would say is exceptional. The Sindar archers are not bad. But I don't know, there's something better about the Galadriel veterans, I find. But again, look at this mass being pushed back just as I was. You can see that the enemy is actually advancing. Let's have a look back here. Yep, this front line is now fighting Uruk-hai pikemen. Again, I think Isengard, the Isengard player Tsunami, he actually only joined the Discord shortly before this this scenario started, so for his first battle on the Discord this was a good one, and he played well, I think. His use of pikemen and crossbows was very effective, and to be honest, as Isengard, that's the most important thing. Meanwhile, this is going to be it. This thin line of Galadriel veterans. There's also the catapult crew down here. They're fighting to the death. Brave elves in the face of such evil. Again, Mistlands doesn't have a huge force left, to be honest with you. So, to an extent, it's mission accomplished for the Lothlorien, but to be honest, we needed some of these units back at the final stand. We still have to deal with an admittedly depleted Gundabad, 2 Mordor armies that are still in decent shape, and an Isengard army that's still in decent shape. We don't have enough to deal with them, really, so it's going to be a sort of forlorn final stand. These Galadriel are taking quite a while to die, though. They are very golden indeed. Are these the Orc bodyguards that are on the front line? No, it's just heavy goblin infantry. No wonder they're dying so fast. Goodness me, there are some Sindar archers in here as well. Not very many of them left though. Let's see if we can speed this up a little bit. ×2. The very, very elite units certainly take such a long time dying. There's still 26 of them left on ×2 speed. Let's see how long they last on ×6. They just aren't dying. My word. What heroes. Right, now they're sort of being overrun, I think. There's a banner carrier for the Orc bodyguards. Now that the Orc bodyguards are sort of up in the face of these units, that should be sufficient to kill them off. The Orc bodyguards, of course, they may look the same as the heavy goblin infantry, but they are, of course, much better stats, hit points. Not a unit to be taken lightly. It takes a pretty decent unit to take them on and beat them, in spite of their rather crappy look. Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. So yeah, the outcome back down there is going to be obvious, and this is our final stand. The only 2 units I've got left are my Dragon Slayers. They still have all their ammunition. The elves firing at them as they cross the bridge. So this is going to be it. It might actually be wise if I make a little cut here, because the enemy do take a little while manoeuvring into position, both from the south, the middle and the north. So yeah, a little cut will be made right here. So, the final stand commences, and my Dragon Slayers, with their mighty arrows, have picked out a target. And it is, of course, the Witch Realm Hammerguard. They don't have shields. They're going to be a little bit more vulnerable to my Dragon Slayers. And essentially, if I can just find a unit that is high profile enough, the Dragon Slayers don't have much ammunition. but if I can damage a high profile target like the Witch Realm Hammers, I can make their ammunition worth it. Of course it is rather fruitless for us to try and win at this stage, but we can certainly try and get as many kills as we possibly can. The Misty Mountain Army looking a little bit haggard, but still down there. So I managed to get a decent amount of kills on the Witch Realm Hammers. Certainly worthwhile. But again, it's not going to be the easiest position for them to take. We still have swordsmen. These Storm Guard have just ripped through those Uruks. We've got Falas Lords, we've got Smiths of Eregion. The only 2 units I have, of course, are my Dragon Slayers and my Royal Guard. And of course, they were in melee, so they're not quite as durable as they once were. If we look here, my Dragon Slayers are really my one really healthy unit left. Anime powers. Look at those swords. We still have a lot of archers as well. They're still crossing the bridge. Look at the amount of red still left on the map. We were doomed from the start. What can men do against such reckless elite units? They're starting to advance a little bit with some of their really depleted units like Scourge Raiders and Archers, Raiders, more Raiders. Look at the Dragon Slayers, look. Their armor's kind of like Athala Rangers with plate armor. Again, look at that, there's Uruk-hai infantry. The enemy do have some skirmish power left, which is a bit of a concern. The Scourge Raiders, well, a unit that small is not going to make any sort of progress against Falas Lords. And over here, you can see that I decided to pick out a new target. These Blackback Mountain Berserkers, I saw that they were in the open. They were also already wounded. So and they also have terrible armor, so something like the Dragon Slayers is going to absolutely rip through them. But yeah, this is it. The Storm Guard, again, they're getting a little bit too far away from the lines, really. And they're in danger of being overwhelmed. These Hammers. Bloodied up, thanks to my Dragon Slayers, but fighting against something like Storm Guard is exactly the sort of thing that Hammer Guard are going to love to do. Cleaving through their shields and armor. Strong indeed. And then we have Black Uruks of the mountains being charged forward. Nordio is actually much more aggressive than he normally is on this map, and it really paid off for him, I think. Of the attackers, I would say he and... well, I think the attackers in general did a pretty good job, to be honest with you. They did exactly what they had to do. There were a few mistakes made by us as well, which we really couldn't afford considering the numbers discrepancy we were up against. Again, Black Uruks. These Falas Lords should hold, but we should really get these Imladris Guards into the fight as well. You can see that these Uruk-hai. There's also some Mountain Uruk Archers. That one guy sending forward a token force to help Tsunami with his just Uruk-hai forces moving around this hill. There's one, there's the officer, a Berserker. And again, sending forward the Imladris Guards. Now there is a gap here, and I do notice that, and I send in my Royal Guard to meet the Uruk-hai infantry. We do have nothing but elites left, so it is going to be a rather forlorn final stand in the end. There go the Royal Guard. Again, they are slightly bloodied up though. Just look at that as well. The mass of the Uruk-hai. My Dragon Slayers are firing, and they're firing into the Witch Realm Blackguard as it advances. Again, at this point I actually just wanted to use up their ammo quickly and then get them into melee, because otherwise our line is going to break where my Royal Guard is. Again, it's stuff like the pikemen. They've also still got crossbows left alive, I think. They still have archers with ammunition. This is the end. They are the Dragon Slayers, pulling out their guts swords. Quite literally Dragon Slayers. Right, and now they're going to charge in. Help out the Royal Guard. Deal with this infantry that's trying to sort of break our lines. And the scary thing is, we haven't even encountered the Balrogs yet. The Balrogs could very quickly get in behind us. Of course, we were trying to use our catapult to try and break some of this blob. The catapult, honestly, If it was literally the best performance by a catapult I'd ever seen, we could still win this. But unfortunately, a lot of it, well, its ammunition had been used earlier on to minimal effect on the bridge, so I don't think we'd have had enough catapult ammunition regardless. And there was a hit on Moranon halberds. The Storm Guard have been finished off. This is looking bad for us now. There are the Balrogs. In all their glory. And they are going to be a real problem. There's also some Sauron's Will back here. The Witch Realm Hammer Guard and the Black Guard are over here on this flank, and this is looking a little bit suspect. Fortunately, we do have Smiths of Eregion that are ready to reinforce this line. So again, all we can do is make them pay dearly for attacking this hill. If we look on the percentages killed, yeah, we are 15% behind. This is the end times. The North has fallen. I do like the map though. It's very... If we have a quick look around the map, I do like the fact that there are several ways to cross the river, and sort of, if you try and cover them all as defenders, it's going to be a little bit more tricky for you. And I do like how the south, there is also areas which the map didn't use, like down here. There's a little area across this bridge that isn't really used for an awful lot. If you could maybe sneak some of your guys across here as Lothlorien and then attack from the rear, that would be cool. There is also another area you can fall back to as the attackers over here. I mean, it would be a rather interesting thing to try and fall back to here and just try and hold this bridge. But as it is, we find ourselves surrounded on this hill. The Smiths of Eregion gotten into the combat. There's some Uruks over there. Black Uruks of the mountains. Guardians of Khan Doom. The Witch Realm Blackguard actually changed flanks over to here to try and take on. They figured that the Dragon Slayers and the Royal Guard would be an easier pathway through the lines than through the Smiths of Eregion, and they are right. The Smiths are, of course, one of the strongest heavy infantry units the game has to offer, still. Obviously from vanilla. Still flying the flag, and here come the Balrogs. I think I'm right in saying the Balrogs are like the heaviest unit. As far as trolls go, you can just force your way through the line. They aren't doing so at the moment, but I'm sure they will. Try and silence that catapult, and then the final shred of hope that we had will be extinguished. There's still a decent amount of time left in the battle though. Just goes to show, you know, the Dale and the High Elves don't go quietly even when all is hopeless. Yeah, here go the Balrogs. We've got some Storm Raiders back here, and the Noldor Elders. Definitely not a unit to be taken lightly. The Elder Enway Swordsmen clashing with the Balrogs, trying their best to sort of hold back the tide and try and make it so the catapult can't be accosted. The arrows are still flying from both sides. I would not like to be on the front line against the Orcs at this point, getting squished by Balrogs up against Halberdiers and Pikemen. Again, we can see the catapult is still firing missiles. The Balrog's not quite able to get into them, into melee. Unfortunately for me, we can see some Uruk archers managed to sneak around. My archer units that were left over, they're not the heaviest in the world. They're not terrible, but still, you can see my general. There he is, the reskinned Dunedain Knight in the colours of Dale, getting a kill against an Uruk archer. Things are looking pretty bleak at the moment now. King Brand. The Balrogs still haven't managed to engage the catapult. Are they starting to die? I think they are. Yeah, they are. There's only 8 of them left alive, but unfortunately for us, look at that, look at the push. Sauron's Will, just tons of Moranon units. The end is nigh. And again, this wasn't the most balanced scenario, for all honest, but it was fun.
Good tidings. The enemy general lies dead.
My Royal Guard kills off one of the enemy generals. I believe that was Gundabad's general. I mean, the Black Guard were right up in the face of all of my units. Ah yes, the men are becoming tired. What a surprise. The Balrogs do finally get into the catapult crew. Not that it's too important, because the Black Guard are also there now as well. The catapults are starting to be destroyed as well somehow. There is actually a way you can get up around here, which I didn't actually know. So the Nazkai bodyguard did get around. Of course, not too important at this point. But the Nazkai bodyguard, very, very strong unit. Again, I do think that if they wanted to make this scenario balanced, the attacking armies had far too many elites. I mean, all of the attacking armies, all of the Orc armies had all of their best stuff. Balrogs, Temple Inquisitors, Nazkai, every type of troll under the sun, Blackback Berserkers.
We must help his men avenge him.
If you compare that to the Osgiliath fight, which was very balanced indeed, the attackers could have won that if we played a little better. Really, only my army and the Misty Mountains army had the truly good units. The other three Mordor armies were filled with either largely trash or at least partly trash. Wasn't a lot of trash to be seen. There was not a single fodder. There goes the Isengard general there. My general still lives. You can see him actually. Let's follow my general until death. He's fighting up against archers at the moment, so he should be alright for the time being. Kill as many orc slime as he is able. There, a few elves and a few of his kin around him. You can see in the background there a dragon slayer mulching an orc. And there goes another archer. Every man of Dale is worth 100 orcs. Look at the bloodied swords. Again, it's looking bleak. Hope has left us. Let's zoom out for my general for just a moment. The Storm Raiders, one of my favourite looking units. Really the only thing that's preventing our line from completely collapsing under the weight of the enormous advance. And they still do have some in reserve as well. You can see the Blackguard back here. Into melee against the Noldor Elders, along with the Nazkai. Noldor Elders are good, but they're not going to be good enough. Meanwhile, back over here, you can see my general. There are Morannon Maulers getting in and around us. It's going to be the end. Let's speed it up a little bit to ×2. Tragedy. But again, it was, considering the enemy skirmish power and the fact they had their elites, I think we didn't do a terrible job. I mean, we certainly could have been a bit more efficient, but that wouldn't have ultimately made a difference with how much we lost by. There goes my general. At the hands of the Maulers. I mean, under 20% is not bad, considering how much the deck was stacked against us. And to see a new map, and to do another Horton scenario, like another 8-player match with a ton of units on the field, without any crashes either. So that was nice. Hopefully we can do the Temple of Sauron scenario for Horton soon. Again, it's on the map Temple of Melkor, and he sort of retooled it a little bit to fit into his campaign. And obviously it's going to be a very fun one. So that one will hopefully be fairly soon as well. We did try and do that one, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, but unfortunately it crashed partway through. Well, I think we can safely ×6 our way through the rest of this now. The Noldor Elders do take a lot of killing. There are also some Elder Enway back there as well. Here come the Trolls of the White Hand. Walking into battle, sauntering in. There are no Balrogs left though, we finished them off. Well, here we are.
Our enemies have snatched victory from us like thieves in the night.
Not really like thieves in the night. They took it fair and square. Look at how many men they still had left. And there we go. So, for the attackers, the most kills went to the Misty Mountains again. I'm not too surprised about that. Lothlorien's job was probably the hardest one out of all of us, having to sort of hold that forest while under continuous fire, and also they had to cover more than one angle. As a result, obviously Lothlorien got the least amount of kills among our armies. And yeah, I mean, I'm happy obviously that I got the most kills here, but again, I was able to set up a pretty effective defence, and I'm not too surprised about that, to be honest with you, considering the forces that were arrayed against us. If we look here, Dragon Slayers 304 units, not bad for a unit with low ammunition. Royal Guard did okay as well, but my most impressive unit, a unit of Dalian Marksmen that got 748 kills, mostly on stuff like Morannon Maulers and sort of basic Uruk units, but still, that's a lot of kills. Stuff like Spearmen as well, held the line well. The Dismounted Elves did very well. The Paladins, you know, 443 kills is not bad in a short amount of time that they were committed. What about the Sword Masters? 241 and 132. They didn't do quite so well, unfortunately for us. And yeah, Avari Elder Pikeman 497. Barding Herd. Barding Herd didn't get a lot of kills, but they held the line for me very, very well. They survived a long time. So, that was another Horton scenario. I'm not sure what the map is called. It was just called Hold Line. But even so, very fun to do another very large scenario. The next one, I suppose it has a good chance of being my 1000 subscriber special. I don't know exactly what it's going to be at this point. I've asked for some suggestions in the comments. I've got a few ideas, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, thank you for watching this, and I hope you'll join me for the next one, because I hope that I can make the next one worthy of the name.